Within 5 seconds of the last round being fired, people were literally turned around in front of me, beside me, and behind me, facing the media, and they were screaming, yelling, this is your fault. I know how swearing goes on these things, so I'm not going to say the things that I heard.
All right, we are joined today by Mike McCormick. Mike apparently watches some of my shows with America's Untold Stories, another channel that I have, where we cover, among other subjects, the JFK assassination. And Mike happened to be at the Donald J. Trump rally and witnessed firsthand the events, which drew a parallel, I believe, in his mind to JFK. So we're very fortunate to have Mike here to talk about what he saw. And as you can see in this video playing in the background, he was right there. How are you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing well. It's been an interesting few days, to be sure. We went to the rally on Saturday and kind of felt like a bit of a time crunch because we had a 6 a.m. flight Sunday to the Bahamas. So we got home, less than 3 hours of sleep, and we were right up at 2 a.m. to, catch our flight to the Bahamas. So here I am,
I can only imagine, because when all of this went down, I was actually doing another stream, and I was in shock when I found out about the event and trying to figure out what's going on, following the news, hopefully reacting responsibly without too much speculation, too much conjecture. I can only imagine what it actually felt like to you. You were there. You actually heard the shots. You could have been in peril. I mean, one of your neighbors was killed. And by that, I mean somebody who lives in your region was killed. I mean, how do you handle that?
I think I still am. I would say that he was probably 50 feet to our left, maybe 70, between 50 and 75 feet to my left. I don't know. My concern really has been over my son, and how he was processing it, and he seems to be okay. I don't think he truly grasps the magnitude of what happened, and I think that's the best way of describing it. When the first shot went off, just that split second, I was thinking, who would be doing fireworks, or not fireworks, but firecracker or something like that. And it's so cliche to hear that, because how many times as it relates to the JFK assassination, do you hear people say, "Wow, the first thing I thought of was firecrackers." Even Secret Service people that I've heard interviewed said, "Well, we thought it was somebody let off a couple firecrackers." And I would say that was the first round went off, that split second. That was the first thought I had, is like, who would be doing such a thing? And by the time the second shot went off, I knew exactly what it was. I'm a little uncomfortable with my reaction, because I immediately got down, but at the same time, I kind of stood right back up, because there was a strange sense that, well, I'm not in any danger here. I'm not the target. So I wanted to be able to see what was going on. Like you said, 40 years of reading and watching anything I could on the JFK assassination, and still not knowing what really happened there. It was the most surreal feeling in the world to be there. And I couldn't believe it, that, something of that magnitude, I was there right in the middle of it, in a little town, north of where we live in Pittsburgh. It still, to me, is stunning.
Now, just so the audience understands, because I think this is extremely relevant, you have numerous years working in law enforcement, and that may have been reflected in your reaction? Like perhaps you were calmer or able to stand up more, maybe less panic. Can you describe your law enforcement experience and how it may or may not have reflected on your reaction?
I was an MP in the Army. Um, I was in for 14 years. I had some health issues. I had heart issues, and I was medically discharged. And immediately after that, I worked for Department of the Army as a civilian police officer, and I did that for the next 18 years. A lot of my background has been in traffic accident investigation and things like that, as well as regular law enforcement. But I also had the unique opportunity to work several times with the Secret Service, and I found it fascinating. I wish that we all wish we could go back and do things differently in our lives, but that is one thing that I wish I had made more of an effort to try and do. Something along the lines of Secret Service or something like that. I always enjoyed doing it. I'm a kind of person that will ask 1,000 questions in an environment like that. I really enjoyed doing it, and I learned a lot doing it. So when we got there on Saturday, um,
Before we get into that, you had mentioned before we started that you actually, I think, worked a security detail or with the Secret Service for President Obama. Is that
one of
correct?
the last things I did before I retired, I was the lead vehicle in his motorcade.
Hmm.
I mean, to this day, I can still recall vividly, driving to where we were going from the airfield, and being able to look in my mirror and seeing Obama in my rearview mirror. And I live in Pittsburgh now, but I'm from a smaller town in Pennsylvania. It's called Williamsport. It's where the Little League World Series takes place every year. And just the thought of being from a small town like that and having the opportunity to do the things that I was able to do, it was a great experience. So even though I'm certainly not a Democrat, Obama was my president at the time, and
He
I
was everybody's president.
right,
Sure.
and uh, it was an honor to do it, and getting to see him, it was great. So yeah, I think it definitely provided a unique perspective because, again, getting back to Saturday, when I got in there, we had all kinds of time. He was supposed to start speaking at 5, and didn't come out until 6. And
Well, before we get to that, when you got there, what kind of procedures did you go through before you got in?
I use a cane now, so they they had an ADA line for people to get in, and we were probably 10 people back in that line, and they started letting us through. Then they stopped us, literally right in front of me, to stop allowing us in to allow the media to get through. So again, it provided a unique perspective because I watched exactly how they searched all of the Secret Service gear, or I'm sorry, all of the media's equipment. Every single bag, every single tripod, everything that they went through. I watched them do it.
Your cane, did they scan it, X-ray it, do anything?
They didn't have any X-ray machines. They had magnetometers, so they just took it.
Okay.
They were checking it to see if there was anything, because it's a metal. It's just your typical metal, silver cane.
Okay.
So they took that, you know, empty. It was thorough. I didn't feel that they did. They were shortcutting anything. They were very serious, very professional. But I also had the opportunity to stand there for 20 minutes waiting for the media to get through, where I was talking to a couple of the Secret Service guys, and it was just interesting conversation, about things going on. Good, good natured conversation. It was fun. My son got to learn a few things about what they were doing. Everything was professional, very professional. They were very professional.
Your placement, because you have the cane, I'm guessing ADA or disability. Did that factor in your placement? Like maybe you were in a good position.
Like I said, we were probably 10 deep in that row of the ADA line. So I think what they were doing was they started allowing us to go first, and the only thing I could think of at the time is they didn't want to put anybody who was in a wheelchair or anything like that in any peril by allowing everybody to go, because I've been to a lot of events like that, and I think sometimes people tend to run trying to get to the front, and I think that they were allowing us in first so we wouldn't get trampled or something. So that's what happened. But then we got stopped. But when they finally did allow us to go through, my son and I were moving along, and I could see it had a slight the field had a slight slope to it, and as you were walking,
upward toward the podium
no,
or downward toward?
down, like a very slight slope going down to towards where the podium was. So at
Okay.
that point, I thought, wow, this is kind of strange that there were so many available open seats. First of all, I didn't expect there to be any seating.
Mm-hmm.
It was hot as you could possibly imagine out there that day. It was probably 90, 95 degrees, but very humid. It was miserable. So we had all this time, but when I got up there, there were seats available like in the second row. And I think anybody who goes to an event like that wants to be as close as they possibly can. Well, I always thought I'd like to be right behind them on the stage, so my family could see me on TV or whatever, just like any other, fanboy, So
Hi, Mom.
right, right. So, but as we were sitting there, there were a couple seats of it. There were a lot of seats available right there in the front, dead center stage, and I thought, wow, this is pretty good. But some people had things on the chairs, so you couldn't get, So
Mm-hmm.
bottom line is we took two seats in the center, or the seventh row in the center, and just sat there and waited. And but while we were sitting there waiting, I was just like constantly looking around, taking in everything. There were a lot
Now, was
of,
that from your cop experience? You just kind of
yeah, I
get
wanted to see.
environmental
Right.
awareness?
I wanted to see if anything had changed from when I had done it in the past, because anything relating to, I've only ever seen one other president, not while not while I wasn't working.
Well, that's one more than most.
Well, yeah, this was my son's first, and I think my
Mhm.
seventh. So the whole thing was such a different perspective, a vantage point, I guess, if you will, because every other time I've been inside of the perimeter, free to move around wherever I wanted, and this time I wasn't. So while I sat there, I was explaining things to my son. He was very interested and engaged in the conversation. I was pointing out everything to him. Um, there was a gentleman to my right. I was explaining things to him as well. And I don't know to what extent we can go into those observations, because I wouldn't want to compromise anything that they do.
Well, I mean, you are a civilian at this point, and I imagine that whatever you see, without extrapolating, is what you see. The same as any of the cameras, they courtesan you in the area. So I think it's probably pretty fair game that you report whatever you visualize.
Well, one of the things that they do is, I don't know if you noticed from the videos, there was a lot of farm equipment there. There was
I
like,
did not.
to my left, there was a big combine,
Mhm.
a literal combine in this open field to my left. There were tractors, there were trucks, there were.
Actually, I hate to interrupt because you said that. That reminded me. I have a short attention span. You said a combine in the middle of an open field. Now, I did want to query that. From the pictures, it appears that this is a very remote location, or there's a lot of space, a lot of open space around the stage and the area without, like a bunch of buildings. This is not like a city block with a, bunch of buildings going down. Are there a lot of surrounding buildings, or is
No,
it very few?
no, very few.
Okay.
And I noticed that right away, that it seemed kind of, it was a very wide open area, but the way they had everybody crammed into that area, between
Mhm.
the media was behind us. They had a big, not a flatbed. They had a big platform behind us that the media
Mhm.
was on. Which, as I said earlier, with the heat, they had these real powerful lights on the whole time behind you, and it was hot.
Mhm.
So um, the whole time while we were waiting, I was just scanning everything, paying attention to everything, like I said, and I'm pointing out to my son the reason for the placement of that farm equipment, and the other things, because it's a line of sight issue where they're
Mhm.
potentially blocking someone's line of sight between the open area out to our left and right and the podium where he was. Um, so
So like a natural obstruction.
yes, right. And if you also notice, and every time I'm going to refer to the stage, I'll refer to it as my left or right. So
Okay, the
as
stage is your left.
right.
Okay, got
So
it. Got
as I'm looking at the stage on the left hand side, there was probably 15 U.S. flags. That was another thing that they had up there. It's just something
it.
to
Mhm.
to block the line of sight of anybody outside of the area. Um, the video that I watched from you yesterday, the gentleman was saying about the water tower. I did see the water tower,
Mhm.
um, and I noticed there was no one on it, and then I noticed that one building to my left. And when I say one building, I don't want to get anyone confused. There was one building, but if you notice, like if you see the overhead photos, there was like four buildings there, and they're all attached by like a little breezeway. Like you could walk through it in the winter or in the rain,
Okay.
go building to building without having to go outside.
Now, do all the buildings have the same view of the stage, or is it they're just all connected? One having a particular view, and the other ones maybe not clearly.
The one that the shooter was on was obviously the closest to
Okay.
the podium, and then they were just kind of like stacked right behind it. So they were all right in the same proximity, all connected. It appeared by that a little breezeway between each building. And if you notice where in the pictures where they found the ladder that I guess he used to get up on top of the building, that little
Mhm.
breezeway in between the two buildings kind of sat in the middle of the building. So there was like a gap. And then there was like three tall trees, bushes that were there that kind of obstructed anyone that was walking by it from seeing where that ladder was.
Other than that particular building or cluster of buildings, how many other locations with I'll call it high ground, were there that had a direct line of sight to the stage?
I wouldn't want to be proven wrong, but I would say there seemed to be like one more building over to the right that someone could have gotten up on, but it wasn't something that I really focused on. It I don't think that to me that felt like it was more inside of the perimeter, if you will, the perimeter of where we were. That probably doesn't make sense.
So you feel that it would be within the perimeter, so they would definitely be focused on that building. Like, hey, this is one of the areas we need to cover for.
That would be my assumption, but I also think that
Okay,
there was a feeling to me. You'd have to go back out and without getting my phone and looking at the actual pictures I have on my
I
phone.
understand.
It didn't seem to me like there was any threat coming from
Okay,
my right hand side because of the way the perimeter was and the way that they allowed us to walk in. That the right hand side of the stage, as I was looking at it, felt to me like it was within the perimeter. Now, conversely, on the left side, that did not feel like it was within their perimeter. Does that make sense?
okay. You feel like it was outside of
Yeah.
their range, or
No,
do
not
you feel
outside.
like
Not outside of their range. It just didn't feel like it had the same level of security that it did on the right hand.
I see, I see. Now, did that concern you at all ahead of time or not? I mean, and I'm not expecting you to
I've
be
got to be
concerned.
honest with you. None of it felt like there was nothing felt like there was a lack of security or a lack of coverage.
Okay.
And the way I'll explain that in the pictures that I had sent you, if you were while you're looking at the stage, There were 3 buildings directly behind the podium where the president was. The building on the left, I was looking at it, the building on the right, as I was looking at it, there was a cat team on each roof. So you had 2 Secret Service, uniform Secret Service.
Now, you said cat team. That's a counter
assault teams.
Thank you. Go on.
So there was a team on each of those roofs behind where the president was.
Okay.
The one on my right was looking towards the right. The one on my left was looking towards the left. And I guess the obvious thing, talking about them is I have no idea how they could not have seen him get up on that roof. I have no idea how they missed that. It was truly directly within his line of sight. Maybe just a little bit to the left, but I for the life of me, I can't figure out how that was missed. I just can't.
Now, did you see him yourself?
No.
I mean, even after the shots, did you see him at all? Oh, no. Okay.
Now, one of the things I found funny, any kind of training you do over the years, you're going to get the whisper in one person's ear, tell them something, and then have them go down the line, 10 more people. It's always going to be different by the time it gets to the end.
Yeah, the old game called rumor.
Yeah. And immediately upon walking out of the place, I started questioning what I had seen, because I heard the other people saying the shots came from the right, the different number of shots that people heard. To me, it was bizarre, all of the different things I heard walking out in that, big crowd of people.
Well, from my background, especially in an open area, just it's very difficult sometimes to ascertain where's the direction of sound at times. Like, it could sound like it's to the right of you. That doesn't mean it is. And that's one of the things I want to be careful about, and maybe something you can clear up, because, people are like, those rounds weren't loud enough. And my argument is that when you take the actual microphones, we have modern microphones, it has an attack that cuts out high levels of sound. So maybe you can clear that up. How loud were the rounds?
I've got to be honest with you. It had a muffled tone to it. And like I said, when the first round went off, I thought, who's letting off a firecracker or something? By the time the second one went off, again, I knew exactly what it was, and I knew where it was coming from. Me personally, I counted 8 rounds being fired, and
so what was the sequence of those? I'm sorry to keep interrupting.
No, it's okay, because you're keeping me focused as well. There was the first round went off, slight pause. And then, I heard
one that he was hit by was 2, I think.
From my vantage point, I didn't look left immediately. I was watching to see what was going on up there. I think there was some joke about him using a PowerPoint. They had the 2 large video monitors on the left and right of the stage. On the video monitor, he had immigration statistics that were posted on like a PowerPoint slide. And it showed when he left office and the numbers of, illegal immigrants, when he left office and then now.
Oh, right. Stats. He was pointing at stats. Sure.
And he's pointing at at that video board. And he's explaining the statistics that were on it. And so he was kind of turned a little bit. So as I was watching him, I didn't really see him reach up to his ear. I just saw the look on his face. And then he immediately went down behind the podium. And I don't think I'm sharing anything that shouldn't be said. They put the Stars and Stripes bunting in front of the podium, but
that's steel,
right?
People, yeah.
So, clearly he knew to get down and get behind that, which he did.
Sure.
One of the to go back to the question of the rounds, I don't really remember the exact spacing of the shots, but I do know that every single one of them sounded the same. And
That was a good question. The return fire sounded the same too?
yeah, now
Okay.
let me get to that for 1 second, if you would.
Yeah, of course.
I could see the cat team on that rooftop.
Hmm.
Again, I sent you the pictures. You could see how clear they were. They were right there in the open. Everybody could see them.
Hmm.
Um, as I was watching him, you could see him behind the weapon, and there's actual video of this out, where you see him and he's looking through the scope, and then he looks up, and then he goes right back down on the weapon. And immediately when he went back down to like line up in the scope again, the weapon, I could see the recoil of the weapon, but I never heard that shot because it
Right.
sounded like the shots were still coming from the left. I saw the weapon move, but I never heard that. I
Now,
never heard any audible difference in the sound of the rounds being fired.
very interesting. Okay, now, well, just to let you know, I actually had a sniper on, and that video came out before you had a chance to see it. I think his speculation is that it's possible that that sniper was looking at what he called the dope chart, where he saw it, he broke off the scope, and he was looking at a chart or something on his gun to go and then get his proper windage and sight. I don't know if that's what happened, but does that describe or possibly describe what you said?
It does, but at the same time, I don't think when he came up off the weapon and looked, he didn't have to shift the weapon. I mean, when he went right back down onto the weapon, I immediately saw the recoil, but the shots still sounded the same. And so I'm assuming that that's what they were doing, because prior to that, you could see them up there with binoculars scanning the area. There probably, to me, it didn't seem like there would have been much to look at because of the placement of the trees, et cetera, et cetera. And then there was only that one building. So um, uh, I just don't know. Now, as it relates to the rounds being fired, and I mentioned this in my message to you last night, um, one of the things that stands out to me vividly that I've not heard anyone say anything about, and again, we left and came to the Bahamas, not even 12 hours later. So I've not seen anything on television as it relates to it. But one of the things that I did see, they had a bank of speakers on the left and right of the stage. And this is about the only time I think I was really panicked because I didn't know what it was. The way the speakers stacks were hanging, just like you would go to a concert. It was just like that one
Like the wall of sound type of thing?
at maybe the last round or the next to last round that was fired. In that same time frame, I saw one of the lower speakers in that stack started. It looked like it was just emitting this. It was like a brownish grayish mist.
Interesting. No, so it's colored? It was distinctly colored?
Yeah, definitely. It was again. I just and just in my mind's eye, I've not seen a picture of it since. I've not seen video of it. I don't know if anyone captured it, but I've not heard anybody say anything about it. It it, it emitted this mist. The mist is the best terminology I can come up with. I've been to some hockey games and they have like where they'll like somebody scores a goal and they'll shoot this just like a white cloud of steam up into the air. It reminded me of that.
I'm from Tucson. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but on really, really hot days, they have like misters that just kind of. Is it similar in texture or?
This projected out further than I would have expected for something like that.
So could it have been a camouflage or a distraction
I
type
thought
of
it
thing?
was like some sort of screening maneuver that the Secret Service themselves were using to and then just that instantly I started thinking, well, geez, did the shots really come from the right then? Because this mist is coming, like I'm thinking they're trying to screen something from the right, but it's something that's probably going to bother me for a while because I have no idea what it was.
Now, okay, when did that occur? And the reason why I say we all seen the sequence where shots fired, Trump goes down. He's down for a little while. He doesn't just immediately get escorted out I don't know how long that was. It seemed like a minute or two. But did the misting come out?
Like I said, it was either the last shot or the next to last shot where in that time frame is when I saw that the mist come out of those speakers. It was very bizarre. And I said, I was saying to my son, I'm like, my son asked, what is that? Dad, what is that? And I said, I have no idea. I said, I think it's somebody trying to block someone's line of sight. That was the only thing I could think of, because the only other alternative was, well, I guess it could have been something, like a bullet hit the speaker and just whatever. But I'm horribly lacking in a better way of describing it. The misting lasted about 3 to 5 seconds, and then it was over. And then I basically forgot about it. But it's something that I've given a lot of thought to since it happened. But my son saw it. He's like, Dad, what is that? And I just thought it was like some sort of screening thing that they were doing to block anybody's line of sight.
If true, it's smart. I mean, it seems like a great idea.
I'm expecting something like out of Dark Knight Rises, where the Secret Service comes out and has some big pop up ballistic shield or some sort of Kevlar material or something to like just block the line of sight. That gets into the whole other issue with the height of the Secret Service agents and stuff like that, leaving the president's head and shoulders basically exposed when they were trying to get him off the podium.
Were you observing them? Hold on, I want to get into that a little bit, because I want to be fair to people.
I do too.
There's pictures of at least one Secret Service agent who seemed to be separated from the pile a bit,
behind
crouching.
Yeah,
correct. Now. The reason why I want to be fair is because that's a still, and when you're talking about movies, I can capture a still and you might be right there. You might have been in mid-movement. Did the person actually linger behind them with a gap, or was that just caught in a bad frame in a bad way?
I honestly can't say, because when he went down and they were on top of him, you couldn't see through that where the steel shield, if you will, was.
Oh, okay.
So it was hard to see. I did see her several times because, again, taking in all of the things and, looking at, trying to figure out everything that was going on. One of the thoughts I had to myself was, there's a whole lot of, female agents there. I don't know if they were all Secret Service or if they were Homeland Security agents. I'm not sure. But there were a lot of females, and I would venture to say that there were more females on that detail than there are. The ratio of Secret Service agents, male to female, I'll bet there were more females in that detail on Saturday than the percentage of females in the Secret Service on the whole. Does that make sense to you?
Okay, now, sure, maybe. Well, actually, it's a good comparison. You worked with the motorcade with President Obama. Did his detail resemble that detail?
There were females, but I don't know why I noticed it. But I did in fact notice that there were a lot of females. I didn't have an issue with it. I just seen, if you get into the politics of all the anti-Trump people, and he's a misogynist and everything that goes along with that. I thought it was strange that there were so many females on his detail. And they seemed, every single person I saw seemed very professional. I could see the one that couldn't get the weapon in the holster as it was happening. And I maybe interpreted it a little bit differently. It's 100 degrees out there, and fumbling around with the jacket or whatever, trying to get the weapon back in the holster. I'll give a pass on that. I would ask why she had it out in the first place.
That's what my expert asked.
Yeah, in that inner perimeter, what was she going to do? Right. I mean, it was pretty clear where the shots were coming from. At least I thought so. So what was she going to do with the weapon out like that? Plus, they had. I guess it's not a cat team, but there were officers up on the stage on the corner coming from that direction. She didn't need to have a weapon out, but it's neither here nor there. It just
Well, no. It actually, there is relevance to it because as a law enforcement officer, in a particular situation, having the weapon out, is it possible that friendly fire could occur due to jostling in close quarters, piling on each other and having a weapon out? I'm asking you that question because I think it is relevant.
I would think so. I think I would just leave it at that. It just on the inside perimeter like that, when you're all of the duck and cover and evacuate and all of those things, it seemed out of place to me that she had a weapon out. Honestly, I'm not picking at her because God knows how any of us would react. I don't think there's a Secret Service member on the job now that has ever dealt with anything like this. I think all of the ones from President Reagan are, long since retired. And, sure. So who are we to judge how they react?
Well, I mean, there are standards and there are SOPs and there are training guidelines, and I think that they should be addressed whether they were met or not. That's all I'm saying. I am not the judge of that, but I do hope that, internal training standards and what happened, if they match, if the training isn't there, then that needs to be corrected. If the training is there, that needs to be corrected. I think that's a fair way to do it.
That is fair, and I think I would be willing to give a small pass on certain things like that. I don't think that's as big a deal as it's been made out. He was in the vehicle at that point. So I don't have that much of an issue with it. There are other things that were surprising, but as I said to you in the messages that I sent to you, when he got up, his reaction. Now, I don't know how many different videos you've seen. Clearly, you've seen a lot because, some of the stuff you mentioned in your video that I saw yesterday, I had not even heard of. So when they finally got him up off the ground, the microphone was still alive. So when they got up, you could hear the people, you could hear the voice saying, "Where do we go? What are we doing? Where are we going?" That sort of thing. But you also heard clearly that the shooter was down. That came right out over the microphone. Everybody could hear it if they were paying enough attention to what the sound that was going on.
The shooter, not all shooters,
right? Potentially,
possible second, exactly.
Potentially, but I think that it would be natural somewhat to react that way once whoever said it. I don't know which agent said it, but clearly they were told over an earpiece that the shooter, was down. But you're right.
And to clarify, did you hear the shooter was down and then they started to escort him out?
Yes.
Okay, so they did get some degree of knowledge, like now is the time to move. We should be clear or clearer to move him.
Right. I'm telling you that before I even left the area of my seat, I heard them clearly say that the shooter was down, and then they started moving him. Because at that point, where we then began to leave, I didn't feel as if there was anyone left out there. There are so many things that you want to go back and rethink.
No, I understand. Can I ask some questions?
Yeah.
So just maybe it'll help clarify. I want to get into the feeling and the psychology because a big event happened that I think is going to go down in history and be played over and over and over. While he was down and through the time as they were getting him up, was there a feeling of panic in the crowd, or were they?
I think every different behavior that you could think of, I saw, heard, felt, observed, however you want to describe it. I was taken aback by how quickly some of the reactions came out. To me, it seemed to me like he was trying to calm the crowd, You know,
Well, that's I haven't gotten to
yeah,
that
yeah.
yet. I'm wanting to know quite literally up into that point where he may be down. He could have been hit. No, I mean, did you know if he was
I
hit
didn't.
anymore?
I did not. But when he stood up, and if you see that front on video of when they
Mhm.
stood him up, I could see the blood from the ear, going down the side of his face, a little bit into his neck. And there, you could see there was a seat. I don't know where they came up with it, but I'm assuming that one of the agents grabbed it out of the podium. There was a white towel. One of the agents
Mm.
had a white towel in his hand, and you could see he was like, trying to touch the side of the president's head to see if the ear was bloody. So it just seemed to me like he was trying to see how bad the the injury was, or if it was something that
Right.
went deeper, or whatever the case may
No,
be.
no, no, no. That makes sense because they need medical attention.
Right, but,
How much?
again, the initial thought I had is, where did this guy come up with a towel? So the only assumption I can make is it came from when they were down on top of him, he grabbed into the podium and pulled it out from there. It's like something that had been pre-positioned for him to use if he was sweating or whatever while he was speaking.
Could
So
be.
just to go back for one point of clarification, you always hear when people witness things like this, everything seemed like it was in slow motion. And I can't emphasize enough how much it seemed like it was happening in slow motion. It was like, it's very vivid. It's very vivid in my mind. It's very, very slow as it played out. It was very bizarre how quickly it played out like that. But when he stood up and I could see the blood on his face, um, if you go back to years ago when Kathy Griffin got and all that drama where she, was holding the head. So I swear to you that it was right in front of me, and that was the first thing I thought of. But he also had a look on his face, and everybody, talks about, he's a tough guy this, tough guy that. But you could legitimately see fear in his eyes when he stood up. The fear, confusion, um, I guess pain, whatever was going on. But you could immediately feel the panic within the crowd of what was going on, because it took a second for, I think, people to realize it. So he stood up, and I'm telling you, it was like he was looking directly at me. He wasn't, but it was just where my position
Well,
within
yeah,
the
your
crowd.
direction. Sure.
But that gap where the Secret Service was around him, there was that gap, and that is exactly where I was looking in, right in front of me. And but I thought his reaction was an attempt to calm the crowd, because before they even,
Well, did it work?
yeah, it did for me, because I thought, my God, after all of these years, again, the JFK interest on my part, I'm like, what are the chances in the world that I'm going to be standing right here when this happened? It's still, it gives me goosebumps thinking about it. I couldn't believe that we were in that position, and when he went down, I thought he was shot, and that was it. And I'm like, I cannot believe that we are in this situation. Now, a funny side note to this: this was the third Trump event that I've had tickets to, and every time when you do it, you can only get two. So I wanted to take my son. Well, over the years, he's like, in 2000, uh, 20, he was 10, and I didn't want to take him because I thought there would be protesters there. Somewhere, while you're lined up trying to get in, I thought there'd be protesters there, and I didn't want to subject him to people saying something or taunting him or any of that. It just didn't feel appropriate. But at the same time, as it relates to now, I wanted to take him because, regardless of what you think of him, it, it he's one of 46, and I wanted my son to be able to say that he had seen a president in person, and he did. But I mean, my God, I can't even begin to tell you that I worry about what his reaction is to it, um, but I certainly wasn't expecting to see what we saw.
Wow. Now, after Donald Trump was escorted out, um, did they keep you behind? Did they restrain anybody? Or they just sort of like, do what you're going to do, disperse?
I got to tell you that from the time he left until the time when we walked out, no one said anything to us. No one said that I heard. No one said, be careful, leaving. I think some of the people actually thought he was going to come back on stage. I really do believe that people thought he was going to come back out. I, on the other hand, I knew he wasn't coming back. So at that point, I immediately grabbed my son and said, let's go. And he's like, Dad, why? I'm like, there's no way they're going to, bring him back out. Because again, at that point, then you're thinking, well, if there's one, there could be 2, 3, 4, you just didn't know. So it's not like they were going to come out and start over. Plus at that point, no one knew that there were casualties in the bleachers. So, I grabbed my son. I said, hold on to the back of my shirt. And we started moving out. The problem is they had everything down into lanes of how you could get in. You could go to the left, you could go to the right, as you were going in to fill in the seating area. And that created quite a bottleneck trying to get out. And then people just started moving the chairs to widen it a little bit, and then you were able to get out. So it wasn't difficult to get out. It took 10 minutes or so to get back to our car. And then we were out of there. Okay. From the time the first shot went off until we got home, we were home at exactly 1 hour. So to me, that was amazing, considering you're having an event that basically was one road in, one road out. So, I mean, we got out of there quickly. I think a lot of people hung around to try and figure it out. I wanted no part of that. I would have, if I'd have been alone, then I probably would have, hung around a little longer, just, because I'm, inquisitive like that, I guess you will, if you will. I wanted to know, I would have wanted to stay and see what was going on, but no one stopped us. No one said anything to us. We were out of there.
So now to wrap things up, what I like to do in my interviews, especially something like this, that, so much went down. What is the one question I should have asked you, but I neglected to?
One of the things that is very troubling to me is all the social media stuff. And I should have expected it just based on the nature of how social media is, people sitting in the old joke, sitting in mom's basement, typing stuff up and not caring what anyone.
That's me. I mean,
yeah. So I got to say, I was surprised at the things that I heard. But I've got a handful, 3 to 5 friends that are way left, very way left, some of them. And I'm very disappointed in the things I've read. The old Maxwell Smart thing, missed it by that much kind of thing, or, give them an A for effort, all of it. It's, to me, it's just sickening, because I wouldn't wish that on Biden. I would never vote for Biden, but to me, it's heartbreaking that people are like that. And within 5 seconds of the last round being fired, people were literally turned around in front of me, beside me, and behind me, facing the media. And they were screaming, yelling, this is your fault. I know how swearing goes on these things, so I'm not going to say the things that I heard, but all my life in the military and law enforcement, I might be known to drop an F-bomb here or there.
Sure,
it's one of my favorite words. I'll freely admit, and the language, the vitriol. I honestly thought that people weren't turning and trying to look for the shooter. They were immediately turned around and blaming, the focus of their attention was on the media. And it was instantaneous, and it was kind of violent, in that I thought that something physical was going to happen. Like
troubling.
Yeah, I thought that they were literally going to turn and try and charge the platform where the media was. But I also think that the president's reaction while he was on stage kind of quelled that a bit, because it was like it literally felt like he was trying to calm people down, and it worked, because while people were still yelling at the media as we evacuated, it wasn't nearly as bad. As quickly as it started, it died down. and I do credit him with having that effect on people.
I think it's a perfect place to wrap up, and I do really appreciate hearing that. And one thing I'm trying to stress is let's cool the temperature down.
I'm with you 100%.
Mike,
Like I said to you, I appreciate the opportunity to get my
sure.
point of view out there. It was something. It was so bizarre being in that, you know, all of the, as it relates to the JFK assassination. It's really, to me, it's just like, what are the chances that I would ever be in that position to? And thankfully, it wasn't. But I would also like to say this, you know, as you know, retired policeman and military time and all that. I would like to say that the fire chief that was there that was killed, as well as the two other casualties. My heart goes out to them and their families. I can't even begin to imagine. I have enough guilt going on in me as it relates to taking my son, and it breaks my heart that that happened. And I feel so terrible for those families. And I don't know what else I can say. I feel terrible for them, and my heart goes out to them, and they're in my thoughts and prayers. Terrible thing that we all saw happen. Yeah.
I agree. And Mike, thank you so much.